I've often met people in my life who envied salespeople for their earnings, but I've never met anyone who envied them for their work. Being a good salesperson is a mix of the right character traits and skills. In today's podcast, I'll list 10 skills that distinguish outstanding salespeople, as well as one without which you'll never become a salesperson. My name is Maciej Durczak, and this is the Sales Insiders podcast. Let's get started. I have a habit of often asking candidates during job interviews what, in their opinion, characterizes or mentally defines a good salesperson. And you'd be surprised how many candidates for a sales position can't answer that question. It's surprising. And on the other hand, it shows that, according to my calculations, about 3/4 of salespeople don't think about what's important in their profession, what skills they should be improving, and which character traits they should be working on. It's truly surprising, and that's exactly what today's podcast will be about. I'll list for you the 10 most important skills and character traits of a salesperson, starting with the first skill. The first skill is the ability to listen. Exactly. And this often comes up during job interviews. You'd be surprised how many candidates. I rejected them solely because they simply talked too much during the interview and thought that the 30 or 40 minutes we spent together had to be filled 99% with a stream of words in order to score as many points as possible. Meanwhile, a good salesperson must know how to ask the right questions. I often share with salespeople this old piece of wisdom, that God or nature, whichever you prefer, gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we would listen twice as much as we speak. And really remember this, because it's very important. A good salesperson is like a good therapist. They know how to ask the right question at the right moment to get the answer they're looking for. And since we're already talking about listening, the second closely related skill is empathy. You can't be a good or outstanding salesperson without having well-developed empathy. Apparently, empathy can be developed, you can work on it, and you can learn it. However, some people have it built into their very genes. They are very good with words, but above all, they sense the emotions on the other side and know how to adjust themselves to the conversation accordingly. And very often in sales, it's said that sales is really about adapting to your conversation partner so that we know how to use so-called mirroring, that is, reflecting the behavior of our interlocutor so that they feel completely comfortable. People without empathy really struggle with this, but they also have trouble picking up on nonverbal cues. Sometimes it's a look, sometimes it's a certain body language, which people with well-developed empathy can interpret very well, respond to in real time, and steer the conversation appropriately. From my many years of observation and working with salespeople, I've found that those who lack innate empathy really have a much harder time in this profession. It's more difficult for them to achieve good results, and it's harder for them to get promoted, because when you move up and start managing people, empathy becomes even more important. However, if we look at the basics and what sales really is, it's largely about helping clients, helping other people, and empathy is extremely helpful in this. It helps with helping. Yes, it's a bit of a tautology, but that's how it is. It simply means it's easier for us to work with other people, easier to put ourselves in their shoes, and solve their problems, because at the end of the day, that's what sales is all about, being able to effectively help our clients and solve their problems. The third point relates a bit to the style and model of work, and it talks about consultative thinking, that is, value, not features. In today's work, especially where we deal with longer sales cycles, where sales are project-based and sometimes spread over many months, a salesperson can't just sit around stirring tea at meetings and rely on pre-sales colleagues from production or other people to support them. Today, it's very important that salespeople are really moving into a more consultative role. That is, more and more often they are acting as consultants rather than typical salespeople, because clients today have little time, they value their time highly, and if they do meet with us, they want that meeting to bring something valuable to their professional lives. It's really not great if we waste our clients' time on just small talk, bringing them 5 brochures and telling them how great our products are. Clients expect value, and consultants, sales consultants who truly understand the nature of their clients' work, who understand their problems well, and through various use cases and field experience, that is, working with clients, are able to give them ideas on how to solve their problems. And approach it with more of a solution selling approach, meaning a method that makes the client see us as a partner in conversation. This is extremely important, and at this early stage, when we are speaking with the client for the first time, it can have a significant impact on the win rate, that is, our chances of winning the process. Consultative thinking also includes such basic, seemingly simple skills as, for example, using the language of benefits. You'd also be surprised how many salespeople struggle with this, and these are lessons that you won't learn at school. However, speaking in the language of benefits doesn't come naturally to everyone, but it's something you can learn very easily. There are simple methods for this that you can easily Google. For example, the so-called purposeful sequence, that is, show, explain, lead, let. I recommend this method to people who are getting into new products and would like to practice. By writing such sequences in this way, we can very effectively learn how to talk about the value of a product, that is, value, not just features. And this is extremely important. And many even advanced salespeople still have this basic thing to work on. Alright, point number 4. Hunter DNA. This is something we just called that for working purposes. Once, I think one of our colleagues from abroad used the term that someone doesn't have hunter DNA, and it caught on in our company to the point that we still talk about it today. Hunter DNA simply means being a born hunter. That is, someone who knows how to hunt, who knows how to look for new clients. This is extremely a valuable skill, especially nowadays when, let's be honest, people entering the market are very afraid of making phone calls, afraid of reaching out, of approaching clients, and they claim that cold calling is really a thing of the past, that we shouldn't be doing it because it's old-fashioned, it's inefficient, and so on and so forth. That's probably a topic for another podcast, but we're not just talking about cold calling here, but also about reaching out to the market. We often tell salespeople that if we wanted to, thank you, if we only worked on inbound, meaning with clients who actually call us, we would probably hire the cheapest possible employees, like some students who would answer the phones, register the lead in the CRM, pass it on for processing, and that's how we would run a great business. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, so we have to hire qualified salespeople who know how to go out into the market, who know how to hunt, who can look for new opportunities in the market, and above all, when they sense blood, which is why they're called hunters, they know how to follow that trail and turn a potential client into a real client. And that's exactly what Hunter DNA is. Why is this important? Nowadays, as I mentioned to you, especially the younger generation, who increasingly establish interpersonal contacts through various social media and messaging apps, don't have as much experience in talking to people and conducting conversations. In using empathy to conduct conversations, in listening, in asking the right questions. This is a skill that, like any other, we need to practice. And today the younger generation has fewer and fewer opportunities to do this. We can be upset about reality, but that's just how it is. Therefore, hunting, as it was before, still is and will probably remain a highly desirable skill among salespeople for a long time to come. CH5 is conscientiousness, which also includes discipline and work ethic. A good salesperson simply has to be self-managing. We are not looking for salespeople we have to constantly supervise, show what to do and when or where to click in the CRM, and so on. The ability to repeat the same tasks, sometimes tedious ones, to make 50, 70 or 80 calls, and if the client doesn't answer, to come back to work the next day and make another 70 calls. This is a skill that's becoming increasingly rare on the market, and of course, we value it highly as well. But it's also about a certain work culture, often CRM based, which is also a desirable trait. Modern companies operate based on data. If a salesperson doesn't want to work with a CRM and ignores the CRM-based work culture, they automatically make things more difficult for the management. In reality, they make things harder for themselves as well, but above all, it's a major problem for the entire organization because it distorts the data we ultimately extract from the CRM. In fact, conscientiousness and discipline are extremely important in the long-term game. As I mentioned, in sales, we very often deal with long-term projects that stretch over months. You can't work on such projects if you're not focused, if you can't break down the plan into months and weeks during which you'll work with the client accordingly, thank you, during which you'll keep the client warm, nurturing their interest. Just like in lead nurturing, where we want the client to constantly remember us, and for the project to proceed exactly according to our plan, it requires a lot of discipline. No matter which field we look at or which area of a salesperson's work we consider, discipline and self-management are always highly desirable. Point 6 might surprise you a bit. Point 6 is self-awareness. According to the Stoics, self-awareness is a fundamental trait that allows people to grow, because if we don't know what our problem is, it's difficult for us to be able to work on it. And this is interesting because after working for many years with salespeople, I often see that I give them feedback, I show them, I point out exactly where their problem is, and this applies to salespeople, managers, people from the IT industry with whom I work a lot. It really doesn't matter because regardless of the position we hold, self-awareness is very important. People receive feedback, nod their heads, leave the room, and completely forget about it. In other words, they don't take it to heart. Their self-awareness, I don't consider it a problem. Even if there's a saying that if 5 people in a row tell you you've had too much to drink, it's probably a sign that you should go home. And unfortunately, it very often happens that many people receive the same feedback for the 5th time, yet still don't draw any conclusions from it. There's a saying that people don't learn from experience, but from reflecting on experience. And this is actually very important, and it relates to self-awareness, because if we don't reflect on what we do, even if we receive feedback, then unfortunately, it's hard to expect any improvement. Point 7 is very interesting. Unfortunately, I have to say it in English because there isn't a Polish term for it. It's sales accountability. We could translate it as, I'm not sure how we could translate it. I translate it as the ability to rely on the salesperson, relying on the fact that, wait, let me check something. Okay, I've checked. I asked ChatGPT about it, and ChatGPT claims that the simplest translation would be sales accountability. In my opinion, it doesn't sound very appealing, but oh well. You know what I mean. The point is, you give a salesperson a number to deliver and they take it seriously. I know it sounds funny because that's basically what this job is about, but sales accountability is a process we have to constantly improve because it just doesn't work that way. I mean, salespeople don't work like that, and I know because I was one for years. Of course, there is a group of salespeople who take this seriously. They get a quota from you to achieve, a number for the end of the quarter or the end of the year, it doesn't matter. They have a target to deliver and they treat it seriously. However, it has to work both ways. The salesperson takes it seriously, and we also take them seriously by giving them a quota they consider achievable, and we have this gentleman's agreement on both sides. Let me remind you that women can also make gentleman's agreements. So this is very important, and it is a trait of good salespeople, if of course they also have aware and competent managers, that they can rely on each other. If they have a problem meeting their numbers, if they see that they might not reach their target, they go to the manager and say, listen, here's the problem. I take my target seriously. I want to achieve it, but I need your help because I'm facing obstacles in production, in cooperation with another team. Someone isn't supporting me, or marketing was supposed to deliver something and hasn't. They're not organizing the 2 events that were supposed to help me, and so on. This is exactly what sales accountability is all about. It sounds a bit unfortunate, but alright, let's move on. Point 8. New technologies. Exactly. We have this group of salespeople who run around with notebooks and claim they've been doing this for 30 years. Usually these are guys around 50. I don't want to be ageist here because honestly, I'm not that far from 50 myself. But people running around with a notebook who come to a new company and say they've been doing this for 30 years and that the notebook works just fine are clearly confusing courage with a weight. And this has been apparent for many, many years, but in the era of AI, automation, and systems that can truly support a salesperson's work at the CRM level in a very significant way, claiming that a notebook is better and that they're more efficient with their notebook is pure science fiction at this point. A good salesperson in the 21st century must know how to use technology, especially in the 3rd decade of this 21st century, when even basic CRMs provide a considerable amount of automation features, ways to speed up a salesperson's work and also to multiply their efficiency. And if you still belong to the group that denies new technologies in sales, you really have very little time left to change your mind. The second to last point, which will determine your career as a salesperson, if you've just joined. If you've just entered this industry and have only recently become a salesperson, I can quickly tell you whether you'll make it in this field or not. Because the most important ultimate trait of a salesperson is the ability to lose and have mental resilience. You simply can't function in this profession if you don't know how to lose. Failure is the best teacher of success. A salesperson sometimes makes dozens of calls a day and hears dozens of rejections every day. These are dozens of failures we have to deal with every single day. And people don't like to lose. People aren't particularly resilient to failure. In the meantime, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share because it helps our good content reach even further. This was the Sales Insiders podcast. My name is Maciej Durczak. Talk to you soon. Bye.